Welcome to 1965. 1965 was a slow year for video game history. Basic games continued to be developed and played, but they still weren't as widespread as they'd soon become. While games on huge computers were still being made, other advancements in a different field of gaming were also being made. Now games are actually becoming interactive, thanks to games like Sega's Periscope, released in 1967. Periscope was developed by the then CEO of Sega, David Rosen. The game is similar in its physical design to many other arcade games of the era. The game's backdrop was an ocean, fitting for a game called Periscope. Cutouts of ships were moved by chains in front of an ocean scene. In front of that were some lights that were used to represent torpedoes moving towards the ships. As you probably figured out by now, the game simulated a submarine's periscope. Rosen later said that, quote, "If you talk to the old-timers of the industry, they'll tell you that Periscope was a turning point in the industry." End quote. A man named Nolan Bushnell, a recent graduate of the University of Utah, first saw Space War in 1969, and thanks to his experience with coin-operated equipment, he set his sights on a commercial version of Space War. He succeeded in building the game with help from engineer Ted Dabney, and released it in late 1971 through arcade game manufacturer Nutting Associates. Nutting Associates had created 1,500 copies of Bushnell's game Computer Space, but it ultimately was not very successful, selling less than 1,000 units. Bushnell would eventually go on to form Atari, after Nutting Associates declined his offer to make a sequel to Computer Space in return for the share of the company. Back in the world of computer games, Ralph Baer had started working on a system for playing video games that could be plugged directly into a television. He started working on his then revolutionary idea in 1966. His system utilized a dialed transistor logic circuit to send a signal to a television that would then generate certain spots on a screen. The system could only generate 2 spots, but in 1967, an engineer gave Baer the idea to add a third spot to create a table tennis game in which the player controlled the paddle, with a third spot acting as the ball. At the time, Baer was working with Sanders Associates, which would eventually become part of BAE Systems Inc., a subsidiary of British Defence and Aerospace Company, similarly named BAE Systems plc. In 1972, Sanders Associates came to an agreement with television company Magnavox to release the system. As you've probably guessed by now, that system would be named the Magnavox Odyssey, released in 1972, and it was the first home video game system. The Magnavox Odyssey included 12 games in the box, and a few more were sold separately, and some even utilized a light gun, and some others were sold separately that didn't use the light gun. Light guns actually made their first appearance prior to the cathode tube ray amusement device, being used as early as the 1930s following the creation of light-sensing vacuum tubes. The first game to use the light gun was Seeburg's Rail Light. Seeburg was a company that designed and manufactured automated musical equipment, like jukeboxes. The company eventually went under in the mid-80s. Rail Light was a simple game. You would shoot at a flying duck. When you hit it, it would drop. Almost 30 years later, light gun technology would evolve and be used in Sega's Periscope game. At launch, the Odyssey would cost you $99, which is roughly $565 today. It could only display a few square dots on the screen, and had no sound whatsoever. Players would place a sheet of plastic over the screen to create some visuals used to play games. Despite the importance of the Magnavox Odyssey, it only sold 350,000 units by the time it was discontinued in 1975. Luckily for the Odyssey, like Tennis for Two, history would be kind to it, thanks to it being the first home video game console and kickstarting the commercial video game industry. And with that, we are done with 1971. Video games are now entering homes, and things are soon gonna get crazy. In the next video, we will start with individual years, so next video we will only cover 1972. If you enjoyed the video or learned anything, leave a like. Leave a dislike if you didn't enjoy the video or didn't learn anything. Follow me on Twitter at Mitten Squad. My name is Paul of Mitten Squad. Have a wonderful day.